Welcome to Are You Fucking Kidding Me? A thoughtful parenting podcast. The show that takes you from diaper disasters to the legendary teenage eye roll. I'm your host, Clementine Lord, here to guide you through every stage of parenting, from toddlers testing your patience to adult children testing your Wi-Fi limits. Parenting is a wild ride, and no matter your child's age, you'll always find a moment where you think, are you fucking kidding me? Welcome to Are You Fucking Kidding Me? A thoughtful parenting podcast. The show that takes you from diaper disasters to the legendary teenage eye roll. I'm your host, Clementine Lord, here to guide you through every stage of parenting, from toddlers testing your patience to adult children testing your Wi-Fi limits. Parenting is a wild ride, and no matter your child's age, you'll always find a moment where you think, are you fucking kidding me? Welcome back to Are You Fucking Kidding Me? A thoughtful parenting podcast. This is the parenting podcast where sarcasm meets survival and we pretend we know what we're doing. Today, we're tackling a universal struggle when your own parents have lots to say about how you're raising your kids, because somehow the people who let us drink out of the garden hose and thought Sunny D was actual juice now have opinions. Today, we'll be covering what to do when grandparent advice is actually helpful, because we know we're not ready for that, how to avoid a generational war over sleep training, and how to survive the when I was raising you stories without rage quitting the family. And on a personal note, this one hits close to home, because not only am I the parent, I'm also the grandparent, which means I get to argue with myself about my own parenting choices. Oh, the things my therapist has to listen to. So whether you're navigating pushy grandparents, balancing both roles, or just here for the chaos, grab your coffee, wine, or emergency tequila, and let's get into it. What the hell do we do when grandparents get a little too helpful? Let's start with this. Grandparents love their grandkids passionately, sometimes to the point where they forget that their own kids are, well, grown-ass adults. That love, it's a gift. It's also a lot. Because when grandparents offer their wisdom, it's coming from a mix of nostalgia, experience, and well-meaning desire to help. And sometimes that's great. Other times, it's not so great. Like when they say, we never did that and you turned out fine. You're only thinking in the back of your head, oh, you mean when you let us ride in the back of the pickup truck on the highway? Yeah, not exactly a solid argument, Mom. Or, you're making parenting too complicated. Yes, because science has made some minor discoveries since 1982, like how babies actually need car seats and humans actually need seatbelts. Again, not solid advice, Dad. Parenting has changed, not because our parents did a bad job. Well, most of them didn't do a bad job, but because we know more now. Seatbelts, secondhand smoke, emotional regulation. It turns out all of these things matter. And the grandparents who understand that, who say, hey, things are different now. How can I help? Those are the MVPs in this situation. When new parents make choices that differ from what you did, it's easy to feel like they're rejecting your experience. But here's the thing, they're not. They're just navigating parenting with a different set of tools, research, and social norms than you had. And the best way to keep the relationship strong? Curiosity over criticism. Always be curious. Don't criticize. Instead of saying, we never did that and you turned out fine, try, oh, that's new. What's the reasoning behind this? You know, that small little shift, although it may sound condescending, from a statement that shuts down a conversation to a question that invites it, actually can change everything. I know it feels awkward. I know it feels weird, but I'm telling you, it can change everything. It tells your child that you respect their choices, even if you don't understand them yet. And who knows, you might actually learn something new in the process. And isn't that what growing up is all about? Because let's be honest, parenting has changed. Research has evolved. Our understanding of child development, emotional well-being, and safety is light years ahead of where it was a generation ago. What was considered normal in the 80s and 90s, like letting kids cry it out with zero emotional support, spanking as the go-to discipline method, or feeding babies rice cereal at 2 months old, these things have been re-examined with new information. That doesn't mean the old ways are bad. It just means today's parents are making choices based on the best knowledge available now. So when faced with something that seems different or unnecessary to you, instead of immediately dismissing it, lean in with curiosity. Ask, oh, that's interesting. What led you to that decision? Not only does this show respect, but it also keeps the door open for real conversation. Your adult child may share the research behind their choices, or they might just say, honestly, I don't know, but it feels right for our family. Either way, they'll remember that you asked, not that you judged. And if you still think they're overcomplicating things, that's okay. You don't have to agree with everything to be supportive. At the end of the day, your relationship with your child and your grandchild is far more important than proving a point. I also want to add here that your relationship with their child and their spouse is far more important than proving a point. We have to remember that our in-laws are not the bad guys in this situation. So take a deep breath, bite your tongue when necessary, and remind yourself that parenting is an experiment for every single generation. They're figuring it out just like you once did. There is no instruction manual. Now, grandparents can be lifesavers when it comes to childcare, stepping in for date nights, sick days, or when those moments a parent just needs a break. Here's the catch. Help is only truly helpful if it respects the parent's rules. Otherwise, it's not really help. It's just another source of stress. Stress, something a new family is trying to navigate. So saying I'll babysit, but I'm not following your bedtime routine isn't the supportive gesture you think it is. It tells parents, I'm here to help, but only on my terms. And when they come home to an overtired, overstimulated toddler who's been up 2 hours past their bedtime, that help just turned into a next day meltdown that they have to deal with. The better approach? Tell me what works for you and I'll make sure to follow it. And then this is key. Actually fucking follow it. Because here's the thing. Parents aren't giving you these guidelines just to be controlling or difficult. They're setting routines that work for their child's health, their child's sleep, and the overall well-being for the family. And yes, maybe it feels unnecessary to cut out sugar before bed or follow a specific wind-down ritual. You know, back in my day, kids just fell asleep when they were tired. Modern parenting often revolves around strategies that prevent avoidable battles. Battles that you, as the grandparent, don't have to fight the next day. I know when I was raising my children and they were really young, we had to have specific bedtimes, nap times, and sleep schedules because one of my children didn't sleep for shit. And when we had people who babysat or family that watched the kids and didn't follow those schedules, it really made life hell that next day and sometimes for a week after that, because the schedule was really important to that kiddo. So by sticking to the parents' routines, you're doing more than just babysitting. You are reinforcing security and consistency for your grandchild. You're showing your adult child that they can trust you as a partner in raising their kid, not someone they have to micromanage or worry about. And let's be real. When parents trust that you'll respect their choices, they're a lot more likely to ask for help in the future, which means more grandbaby snuggles for you. Sounds like a win-win, right? Now, I'm going to tell you a story that's a little personal to me. Sometimes your families and your children will tell you a boundary and you follow it to a T, but something happens where the communication wires get crossed and all of a sudden there is animosity and frustration and you didn't even know you fucked up. In my life, I watched my grandbaby for the first year of her life, and it was marvelous. There were boundaries and guardrails set up by her parents that I worked really hard to appreciate and to follow. But one day, I had to go to the bathroom really fucking bad. So I ran upstairs and left my 10-year-old daughter with her niece. They were watching TV, playing on a blanket in the living room. I literally was gone for less than 5 minutes. But in that time frame, my adult child walked in the door, and I thought, hey, I don't have to go downstairs now. He's home, and he's with his baby. So instead, I started making dinner. It ends up, without knowing it, he assumed I'd been upstairs making dinner for a really long time. He didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer information. And really, for a while, that put a strain on the relationship between the parents and myself that I had no idea that I even created. Now, here's the thing. I could have gotten really fucking pissed. I could have gotten hurt, and I could have gotten mad. And I did feel some of those emotions. But at the end of the day, what I realized is there was a massive miscommunication, and that was on the fault of me, the person responsible for being in charge of this baby, not my children and not my daughter. This was my responsibility, and it was my responsibility to figure out how to make up for it. We're still working on it, and it is a process. You won't always get it right the first time, but you will eventually get it right. Think about how much the world has evolved in just a few decades. We've gone from dial-up internet that took 5 minutes to connect, and let's be honest, kicked you off if someone picked up the phone, to having supercomputers in our pockets that let us video chat with someone across the fucking globe in seconds. If technology has advanced that much, why wouldn't parenting evolve too? Back in the day, parents let babies sleep on their stomachs because that was the advice at the time. Now we know back sleeping reduces the risk of SIDS. Car seats, once optional, are now legally required, and they expire. Emotional health, we've moved from stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about to understanding that emotional regulation is a skill that kids need to learn. It's not something they magically develop when they turn 18. This doesn't mean the way you raised your kids was wrong. So grandparents, listen to me. It just means we have more information now. The science, the research, and the firsthand experience have taught us better ways to keep kids safe, healthy, and emotionally supported. So please trust this process. Don't be a thorn in the process. And just like you probably don't miss rewinding VHS tapes or printing out MapQuest directions, today's parents aren't clinging to outdated parenting advice just because that's how it was always done. They're adapting to new knowledge just like every generation before them. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, well, we never did that, and you turned out fine, take a second. Instead, try asking, oh, that's interesting. What's the reasoning behind it? Because just like we no longer slap encyclopedias on the table to settle debates, thanks, Google, we're not parenting like it's 1985. And really, that's a good thing. Grandparents who get this, they become the best allies. Now, let's flip it. Because while it's important for grandparents to respect boundaries, parents also need to trust grandparents a little too. Just because they feel outdated or there's generational trauma that you remember from your own childhood doesn't mean they have to do everything exactly like you. In fact, a little difference in style, that's good for kids. One of the biggest worries parents have is that if the grandparents don't do everything exactly the same way, it will somehow confuse the child or ruin the carefully built routine. But here's the truth. Kids are incredibly adaptable. In fact, experiencing different approaches to care and authority can actually help them develop flexibility, resilience, and problem-solving skills. For example, a parent may have a structured bedtime routine, bath, books, lights out at exactly 7:30 p.m. Meanwhile, at Grandma's house, bedtime might be a little bit more, let's watch one more episode of Bluey and snuggle until you doze off situation. Will this throw kids into complete chaos? Nope. But again, like we mentioned earlier, as long as the general routine is followed, bedtime 7:30, okay, so let them doze into sleep by 7:30 on the couch. It doesn't mean that grandparents are undermining the parent structure. These children and grandchildren, they'll learn, oh, bedtime at home is one way and bedtime at grandma's is a little different. And guess what? That's a totally valuable life skill. As they grow, they'll need to adjust to different teachers, coaches, bosses, all with different expectations and rules. And learning that things work differently in different places is not a bad thing. It's actually just reality. Each one of us has to acclimate when we get new jobs, when we have new coworkers, sometimes when we have new neighbors. Now, that doesn't mean grandparents should completely ignore parents' rules. No, not at all. Safety practices, which are non-negotiable guidelines designed to protect kids from harm and are based on well-established research and laws, those aren't flexible, even between parents and grandparents. One thing that always stood out for me as we raised our children was that we swore that there would never be secrets. And that's an episode for another day. But we also told our parents that that is a value in our house to keep our family safe. And it was a non-negotiable. Now, if grandma let them have an extra cookie after dinner, or grandpa tells long, winding stories instead of enforcing strict quiet time, I don't know. That's not harmful, in my opinion. It's part of the magic of multi-generational relationships. Kids learn structure from their parents, and they learn flexibility from their grandparents. And honestly, they need both. Parents often have carefully thought out rules about food, whether it's limiting sugar, avoiding processed snacks, or making sure meals include vegetables. I mean, actual vegetables. Meanwhile, grandparents, well, sometimes they're the human embodiment of, oh, one more cookie won't hurt. And while that is different, and this difference can cause some tension, it's really not necessarily a bad thing. It's about balance. Now, if the experience goes the other way, and there's a lot of pressure at grandma's house about food, whether when you eat it, how you eat it, again, conversation and communicating is really important because we know there is a lot to be said for eating disorders and other unhealthy views of food. And we can work with our parents to teach them what that looks like. The other thing is that kids experiencing different approaches to food, it helps them learn moderation without restriction. At home, they know they need to finish their vegetables before dessert. At grandma's, they might just get a just because treat, and that contrast teaches an important lesson. Sometimes we follow strict guidelines, and other times we like to enjoy little indulgences. And as long as it's not a daily grandparent sabotage situation, Mom says no soda, but I got you a 2-liter bottle. Don't tell. Again, that's a secret. We can get into secrets in another episode. Small deviations aren't going to undo a child's overall healthy habits, and it helps them learn when to stand up for the habits they believe in. Of course, balance works both ways. Grandparents should respect major dietary rules like allergies, sensitivities, or food preferences set for important reasons, and parents can recognize that a couple of extra cookies at Grandma's house aren't the end of the world. At the end of the day, a kid who gets the best of both worlds, a structured, healthy foundation, and the occasional grandparent-powered sugar rush, isn't just well-fed, they're well-loved. Whether it's snacks or emotional support, the generational gap in parenting styles can feel like a tug of war. Grandparents may see their role as adding a little flexibility, whether that means the extra cookie or a toughen up attitude. While parents work hard to maintain consistency, the key isn't choosing one approach over the other, but finding a balance that respects both perspectives. Because just like a little extra sugar won't ruin a child's diet, a little resilience building won't erase their emotional security. The goal isn't to undo each other's parenting, it's to work together to raise kids who are both nurtured and strong. And that starts with understanding where each generation is coming from. Parenting has really shifted from the toughen up and deal with it approach to the one that prioritizes emotional regulation, validation, and gentle discipline. Today's parents are more likely to help kids name their feelings, encourage problem solving, and teach emotional resilience through connection rather than punishment. Meanwhile, some grandparents who are raised in a stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about world might see this as a coddling mechanism. The reality? Neither extreme is ideal. Kids do need emotional support, but they also need to learn resilience. That doesn't mean telling them to walk it off when they scrape their knee, but that also doesn't mean overreacting to every minor bump or tantrum. The sweet spot is teaching kids how to identify their feelings and reassure that they also are valid and help them develop coping skills. So when a grandparent says, oh, they'll be fine, just rub some dirt on it, a parent doesn't have to go into full defense mode. Instead, they can say, I want them to know it's okay to feel upset, but I want to also teach them how to handle it. And grandparents, that's okay. Likewise, if a parent seems overly involved in every emotional wobble, a grandparent might gently remind them, you're doing great, but it's okay for them to struggle a little. People learn by mistakes and struggles. At the end of the day, it's not about coddling versus tough love. It's about raising kids who are both emotionally aware and resilient. And if we can find a balance between gentle parenting and good old-fashioned common sense, holy shit, that's a win for everyone. The point is, as long as the core values are respected, some flexibility can actually help kids learn different perspectives. So parents, pick your battles. If it's a safety or emotional well-being issue, hold the line. That's okay. But if it's grandpa telling the same dramatic story from childhood or last week for the 100th time, maybe let it slide. Because at the end of the day, grandparents aren't just extra leaders in your child's life. They bring something unique. They tell the stories that connect kids to their history. I vividly remember when my oldest kid called my grandma to ask about her childhood for a school project, and she told him stories I had never heard before. Stories about fireworks being shot from the bedroom window where she was born because she was born on 4th of July, to her own dad, an immigrant, eating an ice cream cone at the St. Louis World's Fair, where they were first offered for the very first time. No matter how much our parents or our spouse's parents annoy us, they offer unconditional love in a way that's different from parents, and that's really, really important. More than anything, they make sure their grandkids know they are absolutely 100% their favorite people on the planet. And that's something worth holding on to. Now, let's talk about what happens when you're both. Because parenting while being a grandparent, well, that is a trip. As I mentioned, I've got a 28-year-old, a teenager, and a middle schooler, and a toddler grandchild, which means in one day I can go from helping with algebra, eating imaginary mac and cheese, giving college advice, and explaining why, no, you cannot get a pet snake. Been there, done that, it didn't end well. Balancing these roles means navigating when to be mom and when to be grandma, or when to be dad and when to be grandpa. Because, spoiler, those are different jobs. It also means letting my adult child actually parent, even when I desperately want to jump in. And sometimes, honestly, I can't control myself, and I do jump in, and I have to check myself. It also means handling my teenagers' help with their niece, which is usually more work for me. So if you're navigating this too, give yourself grace. It's really messy, chaotic, and quite honestly, sometimes straight up fucking ridiculous. But it's also an incredible gift to watch multiple generations grow together and create bonds I never had with my aunts and uncles. Really, it's about finding joy in the chaos. Yes, parenting and grandparenting at the same time is a wild ride. Yes, it's weird to be giving driving lessons while also singing lullabies. Yes, it's hard to let go and let your adult kid actually be a parent. But also, it is a privilege to watch two generations of your family grow at once. It is such a rare opportunity to pass down wisdom while still being in the trenches of it yourself. And even on the hardest days, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. So parents, trust just a little bit more. Grandparents, respect boundaries just a little more. And if you're both, do your fucking best, pour a drink, and embrace the chaos.
Thanks for listening today. Please follow us on Facebook, A Thoughtful Parenting Podcast, or sign up for our newsletter on our website, athoughtfulparentingpodcast.com. And if this episode will help someone in your life, please share. Can't wait to join you next week.